This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Mod Pod, and our guests today are Caroline Edwards, Product Marketing Manager, Chris Burns, co-host and technical architect, and a new face for us this time, Laurie Coleman, Presales Consultant. So welcome to Laurie. I don't care about the other two. You've been here before, that's all right. So welcome, Laurie. And our topics today, we have two for you. The first one is on-prem the least secure option for organizations now? And the second one is we're going to take a little delve 10 years into the future and see what we can work out. So a little bit more lighthearted, but could make for some interesting conversations. So let's go.
Okay, topic one. My question was with the recent move into the cloud, is on-premise the most secure method?
Okay. Want to give us some background to this question? Because I know you've got some background.
Yeah, that's a good.
Go on, set the bench out. Go on.
So I think I found this very controversial. I spend a lot of my time on Reddit, and there is a certain subreddit on there, sysadmins, and it's strange seeing the two different types of people. Those that are defending what I tend to view, probably giving away my view a little bit early, but my view is they're defending their job, right? I think they're almost fearful of the cloud, and some of their attitude is, I don't trust somebody else's computers. And then with the reason it was highlighted was because of the Exchange exploit that came out, right? So Exchange has very recently just had a massive exploit that affected pretty much the whole world, and it was a 0-day exploit. And people are now arguing, saying, is this on-premise environment as secure as it should be? So if you're creating something secure, should you be looking at the cloud, or do you stay on premise? And I think the argument recently has changed. And the reason I say that, and I'd love to get your input, the reason I say that is that Microsoft and the Azure framework, for example, spend billions to ensure that environment is secure. And we look at what they did with the recent DDoS attack. That was the biggest DDoS attack that's ever been recorded, and the Azure platform protected it. So with things like conditional access and all of these other tools that's within the Azure framework to secure that environment, that might not necessarily be available on premise. Now, I know all these tools are available, but not every organization employs an on-premise version of conditional access. I think my view is that today, take advantage of that security that is available in the cloud, rather than keeping things on premise where you might think you're in the cloud but are not taking into account internal threat actors, somebody internal having their laptop compromised. So I'd be curious to get your opinions. As I say, I'm a convert, but I know not everybody might be.
Go on, Laurie, go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I've definitely come across both of those people you've mentioned, and you see it across all areas of the business. It's I've once worked with a company where the managing director, every time he walked past his comms room, would look in the window and said he found it comforting to see flashing green lights in there. Now, he didn't actually know what the flashing green lights meant. As the person who was doing the IT in that business, he had no idea. The lights could be green, but the whole system could be.
Let me guess, he took real pleasure out of seeing orange and red ones because they're really colourful.
yeah, this is it exactly. Well, that was his call to action, but that was it. And he literally admitted to me. He said, "I look in there every single time, and I like to see those green flashing lights." And when it was suggested that he would move things into the cloud, it was almost his first question was, what would I look at? How do I know when there's a problem? And it's kind of having to get through to people like that, but
Can I suggest that I think that's a slightly special case for an individual. Or at least I would hope it would be.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's with me, there's always two items to it, isn't there? One is if you look at what's available in cloud technologies, and there's not it's not just Microsoft. You look at the others. There are levels of protection that I would suggest that almost every business would not have in their environment. You've got multiple layers with hugely complicated sort of interactions between themselves, trying to protect from things like that Microsoft attack. So you've got a level of technology that I think organizations wouldn't buy. They wouldn't go and buy all of those point solutions and stack them up, not to mention the management overhead of it. But I think the on-prem piece probably can be secure, but you're leaving it to make sure that people have it patched and secure. And even if you've got everything nailed down, what if they prop the comms door open because it's a bit cold, it's a bit hot in there, so they're going to let some air out. There's a whole heap of things that can go horribly wrong. I don't personally understand now, with all the tools that we've got, what the hesitation is around it. I think it is purely legacy thinking for me.
Yeah.
And it's the amount of things Microsoft throw in as standard as well. It's just, even if we take it back, and I know a lot of people have kind of already made the jump, but going from, on-prem Exchange to Exchange Online, and kind of understanding that Exchange Online, there's things where Microsoft is saying, well, we don't want it in our platform, so we're just going to keep it off of your platform. The things like the spam filters and things like that you see people that have had their on-prem Exchange server are getting horrendous amounts of spam mail, and then they go to Exchange Online and it just disappears overnight. You're not paying any extra for it. It's just included in your, even down to your business, business standard licensing, that sort of thing. It's just thrown in because Microsoft don't really want it in their network, let alone passing it on to your network.
Yeah, I think there's and the marketing buzzwords here, and I'd love to get Caroline's input onto this, right? Is this zero trust and assume breach is the new terminology from Microsoft, right? And almost all organizations I've either worked for prior to joining Modality or now work with don't employ that model. And one of our, just to bring everybody up to speed, an example of that is in the past, the security perimeter used to be your network, right? Where it was your network router that went out to the internet. So you would secure that because you would assume everything inside of the network was secure. Everything outside was scary and dangerous, and there'd be dragons out there. This new way of working is everything on the client machine could be compromised, right? So why do you need a VPN, right? Have what they call micro VPNs, right? It's in essence an SSL or a secure connection from Office up to 365. You don't necessarily need this pipe. How I vision a VPN is a pipe from your machine to the corporate network. Once you're in there, you've got free flow to be able to go anywhere within the network. And when you think about it, that's a bad way of working, right? Because if that laptop is compromised and they take it on the VPN, yes, you can put tools in things like network monitoring and saying, right, unless you comply with this antivirus policy and you're up to date, but that still doesn't catch antivirus. It gives you this false blanket because it says, well, actually, we've ticked that off. We've got a positive on that, but it doesn't catch 0 days. So if somebody's got a 0-day exploit on their laptop and you've allowed them on the VPN because you've said, oh, well, the antivirus hasn't caught anything, so it must be safe, then you've given them free roam internally in the network. And yes, there's other organizations that might segregate off the client LAN to the server LAN, but there still doesn't prevent. I mean, we know that way Teams works, right? Is it can set up connections between clients, right? So I think now if you treat the client, and it also is it's a different way of thinking for corporate networks, right? Don't assume when an end user or a member of staff comes on site, just give them a dirty internet connection, because in reality, you're not interested in the network that you want to secure. It's the data that's on that laptop. It's the information within the laptop that you want to secure, not necessarily the network connection itself. So if somebody goes to a London office, just give them internet connectivity. And I think it's such a new way of working that I think Microsoft, with their terminology, and it's not a Microsoft terminology, I know it, but this zero trust, assume breach is really good. And but I think it's a whole mindset change. But it works well for the cloud era, because those live machines, those end user machines, are considered on a dirty internet connection, no matter if they're on the office, from home, wherever on the internet. So deal with it, deal with the application, deal with the data, secure the data, rather than assuming the whole laptop is free.
Okay, so maybe let's take a slightly different angle then. Who keeps their on-premises environments? Is it vertical? Particular sectors?
Good question.
And what keeps them there? Because we keep hearing, people talk about, it's for, data sovereignty, or it's, we want to make sure that we've got control over the data, not someone else, those kind of things. But who's doing it? Who's making that decision to keep things on-prem?
I think there's a regulatory body there. I mean, you've got regulation that dictates that it must be in the UK, but those arguments are being chipped away slowly. I mean, what's your opinion, Laurie? I mean, you work with pre-sales.
Yeah, this is it. And again, kind of, you do see it, a lot. And it's normally not so much a vertical. It's like you said, it's a type of, IT manager, CTO, or even managing directors or CEOs, whoever's taking responsibility for that. It's a type of person, and it's normally the ultra cautious, which is kind of it's almost a funny conversation to have when we're talking about it in this context, because the ultra cautious go, no, for regulation purposes, wherever it may be, we need to keep it here. You see it in a lot of finance houses saying, we need to be MiFID compliant or MiFID 2 compliant, so therefore I need to have full control over all of my information, so I can't possibly let it go to the cloud. And they're not seeing these cloud services as a viable replacement for their on-premise servers, their file servers, however they're doing it. And I think a lot of these are multi-site businesses as well, where they've got a core, it's a hub and spoke network. They've got a head office where all their servers live and all their data lives, and then will be an MPLS maybe that's then branching out to all of their. That's a layer 2 technology, meaning that once you're in that network, you're on all of the sites at once, kind of thing. So, but it is normally these sorts of people, and they're almost over cautious. But I guess in the sort of conversation topic we're having today, said it's almost they're almost I would say, in my opinion, sat on the wrong side of the fence.
Yeah, I think if I put the other hat on, I think the one other type of people that would argue to say on premises is the applications they use. So this could be a hospital that have got a server that's in place since the 1970s, just can't be cloudified, right? It can't be put cost efficiently. It can't be put into the cloud, and their argument is that, well, it works based on a LAN, right? It was devised, it was built when the internet was the whole of the internet was a trusted network, right? And us trying to put this new idea around it, I think those. I want to believe it, Caroline. I mean, I don't know what market research says, but I think things like banks who have had these applications since the 60s, right? These massive servers since the 60s are starting to move that way. You look at Monzo, for example. There's a challenger bank. I think they build all of their framework on AWS. So it is possible. I think it's just a mindset change. And I think Monzo is a really good example there to say, actually, they're dealing with money and the security around that. Who gets attacked most, right? A bank has definitely got riches to be had. And if they're in the process of saying, actually, we trust the cloud, then mom and pop shops down the road that say, oh, no, I don't want to go cloud because I need my data on my own server, where, as you say, the green light flashing to say it's secure. Caroline, obviously in market research, when you speak to customers, do you approach this? Do you see this?
We do see things like this a lot with financial institutions, legal institutions, and public sector and healthcare, of course. And I think that it is that sort of control and compliance aspect that perhaps holds them back. And we know from when people are configuring team setup, for example, there are so many controls that you end up having a widely collaborative platform that's massively curtailed by all the controls they're putting in place, because they're so very scared of breaches and people making natural mistakes. And I think there's a bit of that in this whole on-premise versus cloud thing as well. It is that fear of letting go. and all of the legacy things that have worked fine in the past. So, you know, if we try and move them to the cloud, there's an awful lot of complex integration that's going to need to happen. Can we afford it? What happens if there's a breach? Are we actually better off staying in our current position?
Yeah, the natural mistakes. I quite like that phrase, actually, natural mistakes, rather than, I guess, deliberate ones. But that, I think, is quite an interesting point in the sense that if you're going to email the document to the wrong person or share the wrong thing, that's got sod all to do with what platform you're on, whether you're in the cloud.
Yeah.
And let's face it, most breaches in security are down to human errors. Let's forget the cloud for a minute, right? But are down to human interactions, right? You have either, you know, sent something out you shouldn't have done, deleted something you shouldn't have deleted, whatever it is, you know, or Office, you know, people who have their data centers locked away. You know, I can think about, you know, some large organizations I've worked with, and basically once you'd got past reception, there was only actually one door between you and the data centers. And actually, it's not that.
You hit a good point there, right? I think certainly historically IT staff are looking at securing the infrastructure, right? Not necessarily the Mitnick type attacks, right? The social engineering attacks. And I don't think I ever over 10 years had seen anybody really deal amazingly well on social engineering, because it's hard. It's hard to prevent social engineering. But what I find interesting there is that the tools are available. Let's take Office 365 or Microsoft 365, as we should call it now. Microsoft 365, things like DLP, those two, I don't think because they were hard to implement on premise. If you wanted a DLP tool, they were incredibly hard, because you say, oh, it needs to work with the SQL Server, it needs to work with this SaaS solution, it needs to work with and you had to tie it in so well. Into so much that it actually became the juice wasn't worth the squeeze at the end of it, because it was just so expensive to put in. Whereas now it's a tick box, right? You take DLP, we want financial data, and if it's spoken in an email, then that email is encrypted, and you're not allowed to forward it on. If it was in a Teams messaging, it automatically wipes it out of that Teams chat if the guest is in there. So the tools now, and again, it goes back to the original question, right? Those tools that are available in the Compliance Center in Microsoft 365 make it much, much easier to what has historically been so difficult to install. And it does, again, it's what made me bold the question is with those available, does it make life easier for the IT guy?
I think it does. And I think this comes down to, you know, something we touched on earlier on, was who's making that decision to stay on-prem.
Yeah.
Because the reality of it for me is, you know, we trust so much stuff in the cloud now. You know, our bank details, our card gets stored left, right, and center, you know, either and everywhere. And you know, when you look at it from the organizational perspective, I get there are certain critical situations that you would potentially not want to rely on something, you know, that effectively has a, you know, sort of 3 nines availability. You only need somebody to, you know, take out a DNS setting or a certificate, as we've seen in the past, and it all comes crashing down for, you know, 6-7 hours. So I can understand that if you've got that need, that box needs to be available in this area on your network, you know, 5 nines type, 7 nines, whatever it is you want to put it. I get that. I don't get the generic of approach of on-prem's more secure, and I think that is purely mindset.
Yeah. I think the argument now isn't necessarily a security based argument, because I think the tools that are there have chipped away at most of those arguments. It's now the question of, is it the reliability, and if it goes down, can I bring it back up? Because you've got to speak to Microsoft to bring it up now, and your hands are tied, right?
Yeah.
And the outages are out of your control, aren't they? That's the thing. It's that's what people are scared of, is that, like you said, kind of you know, server admin in a data center somewhere can do the wrong thing and knock out data for multiple companies. But equally, how many times has that happened?
It's fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear of somebody going, yeah, let's put it in the cloud, and then something goes wrong and they get their toes roasted. I think the reality of it is that the people who have that attitude to keeping the on-prem stuff will slowly retire. New services will be bought in and they'll look at it and go, well, actually we should just stand it up over here. I think it will go, but there will be certain pockets.
Is it generational? That's a good point there. Is it generational? Because if I was fresh-eyed and didn't have I wasn't tarred with years of doing everything on-prem, and now saying, right, I've got this critical piece of data, where do I put it? On that SQL server where I've got to manage permissions, I've got to manage the underlying operating system, I've got to know that the TLS encryption mechanism isn't out of date. Or do I put it in the cloud where all of that core, that infrastructure is all managed by me? All I've got to make sure is that access, which is now in, let's say, Azure Key Vault, it's all secure. And I'm inclined to think that if I was coming to this fresh and not being tarred with that view of the old school way of doing things, because on-premise is more secure, I think anybody that is going to come into this industry is going to say, actually, I'm going to do it in the cloud because I don't need to worry about those things, because Microsoft, with its $4 billion a year security machine, is already looking after that for me. And it's that trust of that bit, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I think we need to sort of watch the time. I think we're just about to run over on this one, but there's also a real basic thing as well, right? If my hard drive fails, I don't care.
Yeah.
If I run out of storage, I don't care. Yeah. It's like there's a whole bunch of common sense things. You do have to question whether or not there is a job protection thing for people going, oh, well, the clouds can't do it as well as we do it.
Yeah,
I'd challenge that.
These days, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Indeed, yeah. So we've all agreed on-prem's rubbish, cloud's the way forward. Well done. Right, shall we move on to topic 2 then? Right, so topic 2 for today is a slightly self-indulgent one for me. 9 years ago, I wrote an article, slightly tongue-in-cheek, and we can put the link to it in the details. But basically, it was a sort of a slightly apocalyptic view of the world and how communication could potentially sort of save the planet type thing. And it started off with, number of people work from home at the moment. And this is going to change to being fundamentally, the majority of the workforce. And if people then work from home, they become more productive because they don't have to travel. And if they don't have to travel, they're not blocking up the roads. If they're not blocking up the roads, they're not polluting the environment. And if we don't need offices anymore, they could be repurposed for residential or whatever it is purposes. And then if we don't need to build more buildings for residential or business, then we've got some green sort of credentials coming in there. So it sort of went on this nice sort of fanciful journey, and it's become apparent that sort of a big chunk of that has sort of started to happen. I mean, obviously the remote working has, but we've sold some of our offices. We know other organizations are getting rid of their real estate. I know that there are plenty of office blocks that seem to be getting turned into apartment blocks, and so change of purpose there. And when the the thing that shall not be named happened 2 years ago, the level of volume of cars on the road was massively less. So we did see a change in the pollution levels, etc., and wildlife. And so my question to you folks is, that was looking to now, sort of almost 10 years ago. Where are we going for the next 10 years? What's going to happen?
This is an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because is what's in that blog, did it happen, right? And I think as we talk about there, things like office blocks. Has it happened as much as we probably expected? I think up until 2 years ago, we still, and indeed, if you see today, we've got CEOs of major banks saying, no, we still want people coming into the office, and London is getting busier and busier, and they're resisting this change. I suppose you could argue we here at Modality, we specialize in helping organizations work remotely, right? Our historic view has always been Teams, Skype for Business, and since we moved into 365. But there is still pushback. But what I find interesting is where's the pushback coming from? It's not necessarily the employee workforce. I find it fascinating, the not the argument, but the toing and froing between the employee workbase and the employers at the top, the CEOs, that and just probably one stat that really stands out to me is that when asked, they asked us, how keen do you think employees are to return to the office? And when that question was asked to CEOs, it was, oh no, 70% of my employees want to come back to the office. But actually, when you asked the employees, they were like, there was only 20% that actually said they wanted to work in the office, even on a certain amount of days, not full time. Yeah. And so there's definitely a disjoint there. So Pete, it was very fascinating to say, yeah, 9 years ago, is communication going to change the world? I think we're on our way there. I just don't know if we're at the nirvana, but I do think that what that was going to be named, the pandemic, has kicked it off, and it's accelerated a lot quicker. So ask your question that you just put there, where do we think we are in 10 years time? Sorry, and I know I chunter on, but my brain works overtime on these kind of things. But where are we going to be in 10 years time? I actually think we're going to be closer to that vision that you put in. Why? Because now we're seeing the Great Resignation, where people are demanding that change, whereas in the past it's just been a trickle. Staff are now saying, this is what I want. And indeed, if you're not getting it, we're seeing staff move until they get what they want. And a big part of that is, I want remote working, I want flexibility. And I think, I don't think government and CEOs get it. And the reason I say that is there was an article on Sky News a couple of weeks ago that it said that CEO recruiters were saying those employees that were asking for remote work were the equivalent of children eating too much chocolate. Why? Because they said, well, if you can work remotely, what's stopping us giving these jobs to people from India? So I think we're on the way, but I don't think we're on the way as a natural. I think because the employee workforce are now saying, I've experienced this working from home. I've seen what it does for my local economy. I've seen what it does for pollution. And, you know, generation after me, the younger generation, my kids, rightly or wrongly, they are a lot more environment focused. Yeah, they're more concerned about sustainability. Me as a child, I didn't, right? I'm going to hold my hands up. You know, if I wanted something, I went and got it. But the kids these days are actually, right, why do we need all so much packaging? So they are very, very environmentally focused, and working from home, or this remote working, I think is very much, they're going to demand it, and they're driving it. And we're seeing it in the workforce today. It's just getting the old school, the older people to realize that we have the fuddy-duddies to realize that's where we're going. So I find I don't even think it's going to be the next 10 years. I think the next 2, 3, 4 years are going to be so transformative for the UK, well, I was going to say UK cities, but I think it's going to be global cities. I think we're going to see less people working in the heart of London and more people saying, I want to be able to work. The knock-on effect is going to be the likes of where I'm from in the northeast of England. What's the house prices up here? Because I've enjoyed cheap house prices, but people are going to say, actually, I want to go and live in the country. I want to be away from all these big cities. And naturally, people are moving away from the suburbs to come to these areas. So maybe I should be encouraging people to go back in the office.
Well, as somebody who's recently moved house, you know, that's exactly what happened in my area. It was a massive influx of people coming out of London to somewhere that's still on a mainline train to London, but they've got bags of spare cash from their expensive London properties, and they massively inflated the property market in my local area, effectively pricing me out of what would have been an equivalent home to move to. And I think that's a really important aspect of it, because we've seen it all now kind of settling down, but the big differences in areas has become a lot more diluted.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought, when you were saying that it's all going to be completely transformed over the next 4 to 5 years, I completely agree. And I think that an area of that that relates to home working, for example, or remote working, is the technologies that people have started to adopt since lockdown, like video consultations with your doctor. So that has many plus points. You know, there's less travel time for everybody, more productive day, less risk to people in the waiting room, people in the surgery. You know, there are lots of pluses, but it also means that if you work away from where your GP surgery is, you don't have to take a full half day off work to actually make an appointment.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing for me has been the massive benefit of working from home, kind of coming out of that office environment. And that office environment, you immediately feel like you are monitored in some way. You have to walk past your boss's door to get out, and they, you know, there's always that mindset of, you know, where are you going? What are you up to? And whereas again, you know, that kind of working from home environment is that, you know, if there's a doctor's appointment, you can just kind of send a quick message, put it in your diary, wherever it may be, and you deal with it. And then, as you said, I mean, even, you know, if we look at those consultations, you know, as much as it's probably maybe awful for our poor GPs, they also get more consultations done in a day because they're doing it all digitally. All of their notes and things are right there on a second screen. They are working more efficiently, and rather than only seeing, you know, let's say 4 people in an hour, they're now seeing far more. You know, these things are scheduled, so they schedule. There's an online waiting room where people are essentially in there, but they're not actually in the waiting room. They're probably just sat with an iPad or a phone or a laptop whilst getting on with their, you know, the dishes or whatever it is they may be doing at home, and they go, oh, I'm at the front of the queue in the waiting room.
So this is all stuff that's happening now, and you know, short-term future, and I think we will, you know, carry on down this path. I guess I'm sort of looking more at the fanciful type, you know.
Yeah.
You've got your self-driving cars are coming up pretty blooming quickly, right?
Yeah.
So there's going to be changes, I guess, around, you know, will the taxi driver become a thing of the past? Well, Uber Uber are one of the biggest investors into self-driving vehicles, right? Bye fleet of drivers. So things are going to change on that front. I mean, I'm reading a book at the moment called, what is it called? Automation and the Future of Work. And it paints a really interesting picture that with all the automation that we're looking at automation for people, and that's happening all over the place, is what's going to happen to the bulk of the jobs as they get more lights out technologies, as in we can run our functions because we don't need human beings.
Yeah.
And so there is a question about, what's happening in this. And then it goes on to, well, how do people earn money if those jobs don't exist? Is there going to be this basic income type thing?
Data and knowledge bases.
Well, that's it. But is it, I mean, I do think we've got definitely a move towards automation. I think as has happened many times in the past, as technologies develop and become and deliver this new thing, people find new industries to create and new ways of working and stuff. And I think we have to, we have to hope for that. But for me, I think if we look at where that article was to where we are roughly now, I think, yes, there is the big shift in comms, and we didn't see it coming because of the pandemic, and that's what's really accelerated it. It's the what did more for your digital strategy, COVID or your CEO? It's like it's relatively true. But I think if we look forward 10 years, I think there will be the automation on the way that we do business processes within the office. I don't think there's going to be much else changing in the next 10 years. I think that's going to take quite some time to bed in. triggered
That's
from
that's a
the
really
last
that's
few
do you
years.
know, that's a really good point, right? Because if you think about it, it's technology should be an enabler, right? Why do we do 5 days a week, right? We measure, I think, Laurie, you put a point in there. When people were in the office, people were measured on their input and not their output. And at Modality, I think we are a forward-thinking company. We do tend to measure people on what they output rather than just how many hours they sat on a chair. But this total change, I mean, it takes me back to a story I read about the weavers, right, back in the 1800s, who ended up destroying some of these factories because they thought they were going to lose their jobs. Because all of this automated weavering, I don't know what the tool was called, right? But they saw it and said, "You're taking away my livelihood." What's it? Looms. There we go. So I think we've seen this cycle before, and I think Laurie, you hit a point there that people will become information workers. I think if we can make people's lives easier, I don't think we're going to take people's jobs away. I think people are naturally, or most people, should I say, naturally saying, right, actually, I want to go and do something that fulfills my life. I do a job that I adore. I'm not saying everybody does that, but if a job is tolling and really hard work, and we've seen the coal miners.
But on that point, if you look back 40 years, most of the jobs that exist today didn't exist.
Yes, absolutely. That's my point. So if their job today is made redundant, not them
It'll
being
evolve
redundant,
into something else.
they will find something else. That's just the human nature. I had this same conversation with a very much an old school guy who used to goes to his local supermarket, and he really put up an interesting argument to say, I don't use those automated tills, the scan and go tills that you've got. I don't use them because it puts people out of a job. But actually, I find it much quicker to go to those rather than waiting in a massive queue for somebody to scan it for me. So, but have we seen less employment? No, we're seeing more employment. They're just being redirected elsewhere. And it could be that one person who's now looking after 4 tills because they're automated. She's there, he or she is there actually monitoring those. And monitoring those tills for, let's say, it breaks down. So the jobs have just changed from her scanning it in front of the scanner to now monitoring for people. The population is getting bigger, so the jobs are always going to be there. It's just going to be a different type of jobs.
And the other 3 checkout workers are probably now dealing with click and collect and deliveries, because again, that's something that didn't used to exist, and now it's I get my shopping delivered, and because it's easier. And I can just go onto a website and away we go. And that's the other thing, is we're engaging with these companies in a very different way as well. And I think in 10 years time, well, who knows? I'm not saying the supermarkets are, no one's going to go to a supermarket anymore, but you certainly see the footfall through a supermarket is a lot less because there are so many people doing a click and collect. Or probably the amount of people are just doing a small basket shop is massively up.
I was having this conversation the other day as to, we have this concept, and it's not just us, obviously, but it's around the world, of this supermarket. And how long are they going to be able to sustain buildings that big with a dropping footfall? I think there's an awful lot that's yet to come.
But again, retail overall has massively slumped, hasn't it? Yeah. People actually can't really be bothered to park up, walk around a town centre and, have all the hassle and the stress of that. Do it at home. Super easy.
I have a personal antidote to that, right? And it really frustrates me, right? Because let's say I'm making a meal and it needs guava, right? Me going to search for guava in my local supermarket, I wouldn't have a clue which aisle it would be on. Is it in foreign foods? Is it in dairy food? Where would it be, right? I go on to the big organization that everybody's got the app and sells everything and is delivered next day. We'll not name them. But I go in there, type guava. I know that I've got 10 seconds worth of, that's what I need. I need 200 mils of it or whatever it is. It's one fruit and it'll get delivered the next day.
Yeah. And there you go. There's your enabler.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as much as I think you will see a lot of, again, unfortunately to say, a lot of old school people knocking those kind of organizations for transforming their town centers. It's we as a population have driven that because we want convenience, we want easiness, we want an easy life. And I think all that technology does, and it's to take this fluffy thing that you're asking for, Peter, about where's the sparkle. We're moving to that way of making life easier for us. Every technology should enable us, not should make life easier. And I personally, I think in 10 years' time, I think a working week will be four days, and I think it will be majority remote working.
Yeah,
I think what I'll see as well in 10 years' time is, if we use that is a phone call. People are less and less are they phoning businesses and asking for things, and what that means is that your example of a guava is, rather than actually saying I'm going to go and pick up my phone and plumb in, you'll probably just say, generic AI name, please can you order me 100 milliliters of guava juice, and it will go, Chris, I've done that for you.
You can already do that,
tomorrow.
right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You can, and I think that's the way. I mean, I've seen interesting things, and again, where they're giving AI, they're giving slightly creepy at the moment, but they'll get better. This sort of human avatar. There's a company I've been seeing where they've named it Kai. It's conversational AI, but they've just called it Kai. And you go, hi Kai, and he goes, hello, and it's really, really good. You can tell it's obviously animated, but it's really good. But again,
just to loop that back in, is it a dinosaur?
No,
a dinosaur avatar.
No, it would be good. It's but yeah, and that sort of thing is, I think that's how we're going to be dealing, and you're going to see a lot of businesses that are essentially completely AI fronted.
Yeah,
is your initial interaction with them is likely going to be not with a person.
I think that's starting today, isn't it? You look at most web chats that go into, it's not a person answering it until it gets more complex.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, and even sometimes where they sort of say, we'll transfer you to an agent. Actually, what they're doing is they're sending you down the chain to the smarter AI, or the human assisted AI is starting to come into, obviously, a lot of what I do in contact centers, you start to see this element of human assisted AI where there is a person who's got an eye on it, but the AI is still driving the conversation. That's an escalation point. People are saying, okay, all AI is one thing, let's escalate it to someone who's got a brief eye on things, and who can run reports on all of the unmatched phrases and things like that, and then plumb in the answers so that next time that phrase won't be unmatched anymore.
Right. I'm going to give a last word on this to Caroline, because we're again heading rapidly towards our time barrier. What do you think? Where are we?
I was actually going to say that it's interesting that with AI, it's authenticity that's creeping back in. People want the reassurance of speaking to someone who actually looks like a person. So after all of this clever stuff, it's like, actually, the way it's going to make a difference to me is still a person. So however much automation transformation we do, it's that human face and as close to it as you can get. That actually,
if I may just add one final point on that, is that what Microsoft and the ilk are working towards, to make sure you don't know? It's the Turing test, right? So those that don't know, look up the Turing test, right? If you're talking to it, do you know it's a human computer, or a human or a computer? And I would say yes, Caroline. I think definitely the population are looking to speak to somebody. The challenge has now got to be on these technologists of saying they may not ever know.
So the final word on this, right? And then we're cutting the end of the podcast. Is what you guys are saying is that the human piece of this will become the premium service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it should be.
Yes. And that's quite a good ending. It's almost, we should have scripted that one. Brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you. Again, it's been a delight. Laurie, I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Yeah, good. So Laurie Coleman, Presales Consultant, Chris Burns, Technical Architect, Caroline Edwards, Product Marketing Manager, and we will be back again in 2 weeks' time with whatever we choose to talk about then. Take care.
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.
It's you know it's a subject that you could go on for hours about and say, are we putting people out of a job? And my personal opinion is that we've seen it time and time again over the evolution, and people have changed, right?
It's
and
the fear bit though, right?
About jobs and industries that will always be popular. So yes, we've got everything online, but at the same time, local businesses, independents, people actually want to go to a butcher and look at meat on a counter and have a chat. So you've got like the everyday simple stuff, you just bang 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 on a keyboard, but actually for some things I want an experience.
Yeah.
I want to go to the cheese shop.
Well, this is it, and it's one thing that bugs us time and time again, but we're too lazy to correct it. Is you do your weekly shop, and then they choose the meat that you get, and you look at it going, I probably wouldn't have picked that one.
That's exactly what.
So there's the trade-off for it. So you will end up going to pick things like the meat,
exactly.
the cheeses, or a nice bottle of wine, or whatever it is, and you'll go for that for the experience.
Yes.
But send me some milk.
Yeah.
And I'm
not going to go and browse the milk section.
Yeah.
No, I had this conversation with my wife, is that you kind of knowingly make a bit of a sacrifice when you do order that online.
Yes.
And meat is the exact example. Is you order 2 steaks, and if you're standing in front of a row of let's say sirloin steaks, they could all look
half an hour.
And they can all look that's it, but they can all look very different, and some you pick up and go,
yeah, they do.
Bunch of fat
one out.
Yeah, exactly. Look at them for half an hour. You're going to buy something. No, vegetarian.
Yeah, this is it.
I think what I find really interesting in this is the pushback towards it. So my local town, my high street, is probably like all of your high streets, it's been decimated, right? So we had phone shops and charity shops at one point. Now they're all closed. I have a particular beef with our local towns. It's like a towns council that's supposed to be reinvigorating the town. And they're saying, yeah, but Amazon shouldn't be doing this. We need to bring back Marks and Spencer's. We need to bring Boots. But what they're forgetting is that they've gone. They've moved on.
Yes.
And what I'm saying to the town is you have this old school with a gorgeous palace. We have a palace in our town. It's the old Bishop's Palace.
Wow.
And I've said you've got this beautiful view and beautiful backdrop, and you want to fill it with Boots and Marks and Spencer's. Great, but it's moved on. So why don't you do the artisan stuff? Have the old chocolate shop. I have this envision, right? The old sweet shop that I remember as a kid, where you used to open the door. It was all back wooden, but it was as you said there, Pete, it's an experience, right? To the point where it's the little things. You push the door. There's a little door, like the little bell that used to ring when you open the door.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm trying to say to the townspeople. That is what you should be working towards, rather than fighting where the market is going. You're bitching and moaning because Marks and Spencer's have gone down the road to a massive retail park. They've got their own challenges because they're competing with online. What you should be doing for the town is saying, let's bring the small, people-focused artisan stuff, as you said, the premium stuff, Pete, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's that sort of same sort of argument as don't argue with an idiot. They'll beat you, drag you down to their level and beat you with experience.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. If you try and take on the really big chains, you're not going to win.
No.
Do something different that they can't do.
Yeah.
And then you've got your market.
And reinvigorate the community at the same time, because everybody's enjoying the shopping rather than going, oh, hang on a sec, where are the socks?
Well, yeah, but we've all been, right? We should have left the thing running. Oh, we are recording it still. We could do a little extras on the end. But I've been to places where I walk down the high street and go, oh, yeah. And then you go to another town, it's the same bloody high street.
Yes.
How boring is that?
Yeah. And see, and this is what I've tried to lead other people is when you Christmas markets, right? Those traditional Christmas markets, the German themed ones, with the huts and stuff. That is a massive experience in yourself, right?
Yes.
Why not build that experience rather than just try and fill buildings with Marks and Spencer's?
They're so popular as holidays every single year. Go to the Christmas market here, there, and everywhere, and it's exciting. It's personal, and it's got different things in it, which is what we want.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, you're not going to get rid of Amazon, right? You're just not. They're on their route, but that's because it makes it convenient. But if you want an experience, I'm sorry, but the experience of shopping on Amazon is just, I'm not excited to do it. It's just convenient there, right? But if and it's our local town, I've said, if you make it that it's a destination where people want to go to experience it, not to shop, stop thinking about shopping, start thinking about it being a destination for an experience. And it's so frustrating. They just don't get it. They said, yeah, but we need to get employment up. We need to get this. But you're thinking too short term.
Yeah.
You're not thinking the bigger picture. It's
Yeah.
so frustrating. But what's crazy is that with this move and people, we've got more working people now in our town because of this remote working. That there's more money in the town. But they don't want to be going to charity shops and phone shops.
No.
They just don't want to do that. So anyway.
Right. That was
we should
great.
stop
That was
that,
great.
shouldn't we?
I don't know if Steve's still there and still recording.
Do we need a mod pod of Death of the High Street? Is that what you're saying?
Steve, are you there?
This is the Mod Pod, brought to you by Modality, helping businesses optimize their Microsoft technologies everywhere.